Guys, it's been a long night. Nights like this, when it comes to these AEW pay-per-views, really makes me appreciate football season a lot more. Not just based off of the fact that I'm a big football fan, but based off of the fact that these shows go on Saturday night and not Sunday night, to where I have to go to work in the morning and wake up early after doing all of this content. But we are here. This is the AEW Revolution post show on the Fast Count. I am Kevin Zwicker. Guys, remember to like the video and subscribe. It helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. But we're going to do this a little bit differently than the way that I usually do it. We are going to start from the end, because this was a good night of wrestling. You saw a lot of intense rivalries go to the point to where we saw a lot of barbaric action tonight. If you are somebody who loves blood and guts, this was your thing. If you're somebody who doesn't like blood and guts when it comes to the wrestling, this was totally not the night for you, because that's exactly what we got. But the way that the show ended up, where we had Christian Cage finally cash in his contract, setting this match up to be a triple threat between him, Cope, and Mox. And the way that they ended up with Mox basically choking Christian out and making that contract meaningless, I thought really was ending the show with kind of like a wet fart. Because I thought that we were going to get a show tonight where we were going to have Mox switch hands when it comes to the AEW title. I've said it in multiple different videos that I've done throughout the last several weeks that I feel as if Mox and the Death Rider storyline is really bogging down the show. I think that there's a lot of good stuff going on with AEW right now. You know, ever since that report came out a few weeks ago that Tony Khan was going to involve himself more in the creative process and was going to get deeper into the weeds with the show, I thought that the quality of the show has vastly improved than what we were previously seeing. But every time that you have Mox or the Death Riders on the screen, it feels as if the show is slowing down after you saw all this intense stuff. And that's exactly what it felt like tonight, where we got to this main event. And these two guys were put in a tough position. They were having to follow up really great and intense matches like the Toni Storm and Mariah May match. They had to follow up Kenny Omega winning the International Championship. They had to follow up that really gory and intense bloody spectacle of Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. So these guys were put in a rough spot. And by the time that they were in the main event, it really felt like the crowd was spent. They used up all their energy for the matches that I talked about that took place before it. So it just felt like you had this great night of wrestling and all this, bloody goodness, and it just went out with a limper. Now, they kind of saved face with having Swerve do like that Batman-esque jump from the railing where the crowd was on top of Mox and getting people more excited for the fact that we could possibly get Swerve back with the title. But just the way that it ended, man, it kind of felt like a sour taste was left in my mouth, and it wasn't the way that I would have ended the show. I just put it to you that way. But we're going to start from the beginning. Like I said, this was a show that involved a lot of different rivalries get to the point where we saw a very big bloody mess of a show. We started off the show with MJF versus Hangman Adam Page. Now, this is a feud that I felt like has really lit a fire under MJF's ass when he is going with the feud with Jeff Jarrett, which eventually is going to be picked back up at some point. Fingers crossed it's lost in the ether, but I doubt it. But the promos leading up to this match, you saw MJF really get that fire back, and it was nice to see, because as we all know, this is a guy who's extremely talented, and seeing him in a feud against somebody like Hangman Page, who is been really one of the crowd favorites in AEW, was nice to see. This was the best match that I think that they could possibly have put on to start off the show, and it really set a tone for the rest of the show. I think that the way that they've really been able to play this dynamic of MJF looking at Hangman Page and seeing a guy who's very similar to who he is, but is getting a very different reaction from the crowd is interesting. They have been able to show that this is a guy who, in his previous feuds and even in this feud now, has really had his insecurities peak up at certain times and get the best of him. We saw during this match where MJF was frustrated at one point, and he was just crying because he couldn't put Hangman Adam Page away. And you saw him just repeat multiple times, like, why? Why you? Why you? Why you? And it's just great storytelling between the two. And I've stated this multiple times. People, when they talk about storytelling, I feel as if WWE was the only show in town for so long that people think that if you're not telling a story in a specific way where it involves 20-minute promos or doing it on a weekly basis, that you're not doing it right, instead of that there's multiple ways to skin a cat. And I thought that they were able to do that tonight in this match between MJF and Hangman Adam Page. You saw Hangman pick up the W, and now what it leaves is there's a lot of questions involving MJF. Where does he go after losing such a big match to Hangman Adam Page? And where does Hangman go from here? I thought that, and especially now, and we're going to talk about later what went down with Swerve, I think this puts him in an interesting position where we could possibly get these two guys colliding again, having a big-time match at All In. Because in my mind, I think that Hangman Adam Page and Swerve Strickland are AEW's version of Steve Austin and The Rock, where they could go several months without even interacting on screen, but they can pick back up at any time, and it feels fresh, it feels new, and they've been able to produce great quality matches together every single time that they've been in the ring. And I think that that would be the direction to go to All In. But I'm getting ahead of ourselves. Let me go into the comment section before I go on and talk about more things. This is from Salty Grampy. I was really hoping that Christian would walk out the champ so Adam and Christian could feud. Those are two guys, like I mentioned with Hangman and Swerve, those are two guys who could feud forever. As we all know, they are best friends in real life, so they always have that interesting chemistry. I think now, with the way that this ended, where we're going to pivot in the direction of Mox versus Swerve, I think that there's a lot of unanswered questions for guys like Ricochet and Cope and Christian who are on the losing end of tonight. And that's a little bit more interesting to me than what actually happens with the winners. I'm always more interested in where does the direction go for the losers? Like, where are they going to be able to pick back up, and where are they going to be able to position themselves to get back in prominent positions after they were knocked down? Before I get in more, guys, remember to like the video and subscribe if you're not. It really helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. And always remember that it is free. So Hangman picked up the W. Like I said, MJF, I imagine that if we're not going to see him back on Dynamite this week, that it could be a little bit of a while before we see MJF. As we know, he is in Happy Gilmore 2. Now, that is a little bit of a way. It drops in July, but at some point rather soon, MJF is going to be on the press tour to where he's going to have to miss some time, right? And according to what everything that has been put out there, he plays a prominent role. He is one of Happy's sons. So I think that sooner rather than later, we are going to get a point where MJF is going to have to be on a hiatus to promote that film. But like I said, Hangman won. Big win for Hangman. Big L for MJF. Next, we are going into Mercedes Moné versus Momo Watanabe for the TBS Championship in the dreaded 2-hole. Now, if you've heard any wrestler talk about placement on the card, they always say that the worst placement on the card is usually the second or third match, because those are usually just nothing matches. It's always best that if you're not going to go last, you would hope to want to go first, but the TBS Championship was put in the dreaded 2-hole, and it felt like after we saw Hangman versus MJF, that the crowd was really quiet and they were lacking a lot of energy for this match. My theory is the fact that majority of those people didn't know who Momo Watanabe is, so maybe that played a factor into the quiet reaction that they got in the beginning. Momo, as you guys should know, or if you don't, she won the Women's Cup at Dynasty. Funny story, I did a lot of content for Wrestle Dynasty in Japan, and the Japanese went and took all that stuff down. They do not play when it comes to copywriting stuff. So a lot of the stuff that I had for that night is gone. It's in the ether, because they do not play when it comes to using any type of footage or picture when it comes to their stuff. But as the match went on, I think people started to get their energy into it. I think that people were able to see Momo actually go. She is a great wrestler. If you haven't seen any of her work, she has put on a lot of good matches over there in Japan. And Mercedes Moné, I've stated in many different forms of content that she is the GOAT. She is the greatest female wrestler of all time, in my opinion. And she was able to extend her dominance over the women's division with this debut tonight. Now, with Mercedes, I think there's only a couple of different directions that you could go. You know, you have Billy Starks. They showed Billy Starks in one of the press boxes watching Mercedes, and you're starting to get the feel that we're eventually going to build to an Athena versus Mercedes match, which is one of the biggest women's matches you could possibly do in AEW. I think it might be the biggest women's match you could do in AEW outside of Mercedes versus Toni Storm. And the fact that we're going to get this, you know, if you remember when they were doing press for All In Texas, some of the key figures that they brought on the roster was Athena and Mercedes Moné. So we saw them in the same room before. You saw Athena a part of the promoting of the event. So my guess is she's going to be a part of the event at some point. The fact that she is a Texas native as well helps. And the fact that she's been so dominant in Ring of Honor, I believe that we're going to build towards that match because the competition is starting to get slim for Mercedes. She has gone over on basically the entire women's division. So it's slim pickings at this point, right? Let me go into the comment section before I go deeper into what happened. Miss Monet doesn't really have any real competition until she gets Athena. That is true. That is true. Mercedes is the GOAT. Remember, you heard it from me. But Mercedes took the win against Momo. We had Mercedes tap out Momo. She had her in the bank statement. The way that Mercedes finishes the majority of her matches, it was a nice win for Mercedes, and it was a nice opportunity for Momo to get exposure to people who normally aren't familiar with her work. I thought it was a win-win for everybody. I thought Momo came out with more exposure, and Mercedes was able to extend her dominance over the women's division, right? Good stuff for everybody. Next, we are going to go into Ricochet versus Swerve Strickland, the Bald Boys versus the Boys with Hair. I'm representing the boys with hair, obviously, as you can see. Not to go disrespect Mercedes like that, salty Grampy. But now, this was a #1 contenders match between these two guys. This is the best work of Ricochet's career, in my opinion. Guys, we all know that Ricochet is a person or an individual who has shown that he can go in the ring in several different spots, whether you've seen him go in Japan on the Indies or as Prince Puma in Lucha Underground or WWE. There's no denying that Ricochet is one of the better wrestlers in the world. But one of the things that has always held him back has been his character work and his mic work. And I think since he's been in AEW and given the opportunity to be this, geeky type, nerdy, arrogant heel, I think that he has been doing a great job. I love the work that Ricochet is doing. He is one of my favorite parts of AEW right now. And the story that they've been telling, right? That the robe of Prince Nana, and I know some people like to sit there and complain, like, oh, they're fighting over a robe. Well, the same people that are complaining about that are probably the people who weren't complaining about the fact that Drew McIntyre and CM Punk were fighting over a bracelet. It's not about the item itself. It's about the sentimental value of the item. And I think that the way that they've explained the part that there's so much lineage that's involved with that robe, you got the late Jimmy Havoc that had the robe. Prince Nana had the robe when he was, going in the ring. I think that they've explained it very well. I think that they've demonstrated over the last several weeks how important and how sentimental it is to Prince Nana. And they've done a good job at making the stakes high with this match. Outside of the fact that it's for the robe, they're involving a #1 contender spot for the AEW Championship. And there was some intense sequences in this match between Swerve and Ricochet. To seeing these two guys who really have been going hard and doing some great work. Swerve is one of those guys who has really become a prominent face of AEW. He is probably in the conversation with guys like MJF and Will Ospreay and hopefully Kenny Omega as well, since he's back, as the guy in AEW. And this match, there was a lot of interest and there was a lot of storytelling involved. There was spots where Prince Nana was getting involved, where Swerve accidentally bumped into Nana, And Nana went off and went his own. And at that point, I was thinking that we were going to get Nana turning his back on Swerve, and he was going to join up with Ricochet. Because if you really think about it, Swerve doesn't need a mouthpiece. Yes, the appearance of having Prince Nana, I feel like, enhances the package of the Swerve Strickland deal. I feel like having a guy, behind Swerve really, enhances the whole presentation of what he involves. But Ricochet, I think, would be more benefited by having a Prince Nana, right? But we didn't get that tonight. Got Swerve picking up the W against Ricochet. Swerve is now the #1 contender for the AEW Championship. We are probably getting Swerve versus Mox at Dynasty. And Dynasty last year was the same spot that Swerve won the AEW Championship for the first time. So fingers crossed, we get to see that again. I don't think that might be the case because I don't think that Ricochet is just going to go out in the night being bald. I don't think that he is just going to be finished with this after losing. They are now tied 1-1. So they're eventually going to have to be that one match where they can break the tie. And I think that Ricochet, based off of the character that he's portraying, is going to find a way to swerve over because he feels as if Swerve screwed him over. But we got Swerve picking up the W against Ricochet. It was a very good match. The crowd was very into it. I feel like the energy really picked up based off of the last match that was before that. And I think that these two guys really put on a good performance. And it wasn't the match of the night because there was two matches that I'm going to get into that are probably one of those matches where when people say, hey, show me what AEW is about, I feel like the two matches that took place tonight, and it's pretty obvious that what those two matches were, are going to be one of those things where people will show like this is AEW, right? But we're going to move on. Next, we had Okada versus Brody King for the Continental Championship. And before I go into that, I'm going to go back to the comments. Like I said, Nana would get his coat back. You were right. Swerve's house is indeed his house. Richard versus Mox is not what the people want. Not saying it's going to be Rico versus Mox, but what I'm saying is that they're going to eventually get to a point where Ricochet is going to screw over Swerve. But you're right. Nobody wants to see two bald guys wrestle, right? Unless it's Steve Austin and Goldberg. But Okada versus Brody. The show took place at what used to be the Staples Center in LA. Brody King is a California native, so off the rip, he had the support of the people because he is the hometown boy. Now, this is a match that was very intense when it comes to chops. Brody King probably slapped Okada's chest at least 30 times tonight. I know that it's going to feel in the morning, but at the end of the day, there is, in my mind at least, that we are heading towards Okada and Omega at All In, right? And titles have to be involved for that match. So that's the destination. And I don't feel as if anything before then, there's no big time threat for Okada to lose the title because I feel like that is the destination. But Brody came out and he put on a really good performance. I think that, it was kind of, it's kind of an addition by subtraction for Brody's career. I know that when it came to, Malachi Black and AEW, people might have been a little bit disappointed with the run because he didn't really have a lot of big time singles matches outside of that feud he had with Cody Rhodes and that feud he had with Cope. There wasn't much Aleister Black singles action, and he was involved with a lot of different tag team stuff or trios things. But now, since he's gone, I feel like it's really freed up a lot of opportunities for Brody. And for a guy who hasn't had a lot of singles matches on AEW pay-per-views, I think that he really showed out. I think he put on a very respectable match. He went against one of the greatest in-ring wrestlers of all time in Okada. Yes, I didn't stutter when I said all time. And he showed a ability to really hold his own. And even though he lost, I think the fact that just that he was on this card and going against an individual like Okada and putting on a respectable performance, I think that's a win in itself. But, of course, Okada won with the Rainmaker. What can you do? He is the bitch killer, right? Next, we're going to go to the Hurt Syndicate and the Outrunners. Now, this was a match going in when I did my prediction videos, which you guys can check out. I think I only got one wrong. Yeah, I think I only got one wrong. And my heart said the Outrunners, but my head said the Hurt Syndicate. And the way that they presented this match, I thought was a win for the Outrunners, even though they didn't end up being victorious. I thought the fact that they were able to hang with the Hurt Business and they were presented to be an actual threat, I thought was good. I thought that the Hurt Business came out looking strong. I have enjoyed every single aspect of the Hurt Business since they've gone into WWE. Since they left WWE, if you noticed, when it comes to a lot of, this is maybe in WWE, right? I'm just going to go off of WWE because they were the main, show in town for so long. Every group that involved African-American males, they always presented them as being extremely happy and dancing, or they always presented them as very angry and militant. And what I like about the Hurt Syndicate is the fact that these guys aren't angry. These guys aren't dancing and smiling and kissing babies. They are just guys in suits that come out and kick ass, and that's it. And this match with the Outrunners, I think that the Outrunners have really set themselves up with the fact that they've been able to sell a lot of merch, the fact that they have organically been able to get over with the crowd. I think that bodes well for their future. Now, I think the fact that they were able to hang with the Hurt Syndicate boosts up their stock. Yes, they lost, but sometimes there is winning and losing. I think it sets it up to where they can have this run where they pick up some significant wins, they pick up some steam, and not so much 100% get away from the goofiness, but they're able to get to a point to where they're viewed as a legitimate threat, and they could somehow, some way later down the line take the titles from the Hurt Syndicate. Because I think that eventually, and sooner rather than later, we are going to get a Young Bucks versus the Hurt Syndicate match. And I love the Bucks, right? I think that if you ask me, they are in the conversation for the greatest tag team of all time. They aren't the greatest tag team of all time. I believe that the Road Warriors are. They are better than every other tag team that's ever existed in my mind. But we're going to get a Hurt Syndicate versus the Young Bucks match at some point. But I think the direction that we go, or who is going to take the titles from the Hurt Syndicate, should be the Outrunners later down the line at a big-time pay-per-view. And with the performance they put on tonight, I think that bodes well for happening in the future. Guys, remember to like the video and subscribe. If you aren't, it helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. And it's free. Always remember it's free. That's the most important part. Next, we are going to get into what is either 1A or 1B for match of the night. And that was this glorious, gory, bloody mess of a match between Toni Storm and Mariah May. Now, I think there's people out there that are going to complain about how violent this match was, how, different things that they've used, because this match involved a lot of different extreme elements, glass, champagne bottles, chairs going through tables. There was a lot of blood. But my thing is this: we're at a point in time where we have women's matches main eventing WrestleManias. We have women's matches main eventing episodes of Dynamite or Collision. This truly isn't like it was back in the day where every single women's match, was a sign for, let me go get a beer or let me go take a piss. We are at a point now in time where the wrestling, whether it's men or women, are truly on an even playing field, right? And I think we can't complain about equality in wrestling and get mad when these women have a match just as bloody and disgusting as the men would. This was a match that I felt like, due to the story that they have been telling, this is an 18-month story that has been involved with Toni Storm and Mariah May. I think the level of violence was appropriate. Now, just to be honest with you and be transparent with you guys, there was moments and times where I looked away or I gagged, because me personally, that level of violence is a little bit too much for me, but it wasn't at a point where I felt offended or I was like, oh my gosh, what are these women doing? No, I thought it was great. I thought everything about this match was great. I thought that the outfits that they came out with, Mariah May was dressed as if she was going to a wedding. You had the fact that Luther was involved. There was at one point where Toni Storm and Mariah May were brawling on the top of the ramp, right? And you had Mariah May take out a taser, and you had Luther kind of snatch it out of her hands, and he got a kick in the nuts for his trouble, and then got hit over a table that they had presented right there in the ramp. Now, the one spot that I think people are going to talk about is when Toni Storm got cut wide open. I think that she cut herself deeper than what she intended. You could see multiple different angles of her saying, "Oh, fuck," when she saw the blood gushing out of her head. It was an intense spectacle. I thought that the sequence that they had where they wrapped their arms up, they wrapped their hands up, sticked it in the bucket of glass, and they went at each other with glass encrusted hands. I felt like it was something out of like maybe an episode of an anime. I thought it was great. I thought it felt like this is truly a final showdown between two bitter rivals. They laid it all out in the middle of that ring. It was intense. And like I said, for the level of bad blood that these two women have after 18 months, I thought the level of violence was appropriate. This was a great match if you are into that extreme stuff. And if you're not into that extreme stuff, I don't know what to tell you. You can't claim to be like, oh, I like storytelling and wrestling, and you get storytelling right there and then complain about it. It is what it is. It was violent. It was two ladies going all out. Toni Storm picked up the win in this Hollywood ending. My best hopes for Mariah is after being involved with the feud with Toni Storm, that she's able to really be able to rebuild herself, show off as to why that she was signed by AEW, and show off, how great she was in Stardom. I think that the fact that when she was the AEW Women's Champion, it wasn't defending it on a weekly basis. I thought really hurt her stock. I think people forget how good she really is. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that AEW is able to recapture the magic with her and she's able to show off why she was signed in the first place. But Toni Storm picked up the win. She is still the champion. It was a bloody mess. It was a glory bloody mess. Next, we are getting into Takeshita versus Kenny Omega. Now, I've said this in multiple different settings. I've said this publicly. I've said this privately. For me, the benchmark of who is the greatest in-ring professional wrestler has changed in my mind. I used to say it was Shawn Michaels. Now, if somebody asks me that question, my answer is Kenny Omega. And after tonight, it just really validated that statement. Kenny Omega against Takeshita. As we all know, before Kenny Omega was on the shelf for so long, Takeshita beat Kenny Omega 2 times in a week, which is something that he'll be able to hang his hat on for the rest of his career. Takeshita and Kenny Omega have this long history going way back to Japan. And you've seen footage of Kenny Omega and Takeshita. Takeshita was his young boy at one point. And I thought that this match was very good. Takeshita was able to show off why he is next up. I think that Takeshita is a superstar. He is somebody who is signed with AEW, New Japan, and DDT. It wouldn't surprise me if tomorrow that somehow he's able to finagle his way in getting a deal with NXT as well. He is somebody who's very in high demand all over the world. And after tonight, you could see why. Now, I think that people are going to take a little bit away from the match that he had with Kenny because of the fact that he wrestled Kenny. But Takeshita's a guy who even guys like Bryan Danielson has said that, no, this guy is legit. And he was able to show this off tonight. Kenny Omega was the guy who picked up the W tonight, which is, hey, like I said before, it's a part of the process. I think that there's a destination with Kenny and Okada, and I think that we're heading towards a unification match of the 2 titles, which is good, man. There's too many titles. There's too many titles in a lot of different wrestling, companies. Think about it. WWE has all these titles, and then AEW, they intermingle the titles between ROH and AEW. It's like we need a little bit of a consolation, man. Not everybody should be able to be walking around with the title. It should be an honor to have a title, or it should be really hard to get a title. So a unification match between Okada and Kenny Omega, I think that's the way to go. I'm hoping that's the direction, and I'm predicting that that's the direction. But Kenny Omega picked up the W after a very hard-fought match with Takeshita. It was very intense. I thought the fact that we had the Don Callis element to where any time that Kenny Omega was down and out, Don Callis was there to step back on him and really, make things harder on the guy. I thought that was a good element, but Kenny won. He's the international champion, adding more credence to his Hall of Fame career, which he has already had. He is a living legend. Before I go any further, I will be looking at the comment section. Both of these wrestlers worked very well. Tony is a good champ. Maybe Mariah can go after Mercedes. Stay away from my CEO. All right. Next, we are going into the cage match between Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay. Now, this match was probably Dave Meltzer's wet dream. I am 100% sure that he had a bottle of lotion while watching this match, because this was every single thing that he's talked about in the past of liking. We got an intense story between Will and Kyle that has been going on for several months. We got violence. We got a steel cage. We got spots that we never thought we would see. We saw a Styles clash on some thumbtacks, which was hard to watch. For me, I'm not really a guy who's anti-violence, when it comes to wrestling. Now, of course, just like everybody, has their own limits as to what they want to see. And I'm not trying to take away from the match, but we already saw a very intense, violent match earlier in the night between Toni Storm and Mariah May. That I feel like when you have several of these very intense, bloody matches on the same card, that it takes away from things. Now, if you spread it out a little bit, like if we would have had this Ospreay match like a Dynasty, and we had this match that we got tonight with Toni Storm and Mariah May, I think that's a decent amount of distance. That's a couple of weeks. Or if we would have had this on like a special edition of Dynamite, I thought it would have been fine. But when you have all these violent matches on the same card, it takes away from it, right? Like we already saw some intense shit earlier. Now we're going to see some more intense shit. But I thought the way that Kyle Fletcher was able to play on Will Ospreay's emotions, where he had the United Empire band and he put it on his arm and he threw up the crown, I thought that was some good storytelling. Because this is a guy who, as we all know, was friends at one point in storyline, and now they hate each other. I thought the fact that he was being very manipulative, which is something that he probably learned from Don Callis, who has been manipulative in the past, guys like Kenny Omega. I thought that was a nice touch. I thought when they involved Mark Davis in the match, I thought that was a nice touch as well. You got this United Empire reunion, but they're two guys on different sides of the track from Will Ospreay. The spot where Mark Davis was able to use the bowl cutters, cut open the cage, and throw in that bag of dangerous goodies where you had the bat that was wrapped around with barbed wire, went up to Mick Foley. You saw Will Ospreay look into the camera and go bang, bang. He no ball. I thought that was great. I thought the spot, and this is insane. Yeah. Sometimes you could think to yourself, like, how does the human body do the things that it does? And why could this individual do it, but I can't? But there was a spot in the match where Will Ospreay hit a Spanish fly from on top of the cage and landed on the mat. That was insane. People shouldn't be able to do these things, right? And the fact that you got Will Ospreay doing these things on a weekly basis is mind-blowing. But the match is very good. They involved Don Callis as well. We got to a point where we saw, Kyle Fletcher telling, Will Ospreay, I hate you, I fucking hate you, you son of a bitch. And then you see Will Ospreay hit him with the Tiger Driver, which we know Will Ospreay only says when he truly has to use it. You remember last year they told that story of him not wanting to use the move after using it on Bryan Danielson at Dynasty, and then MJF was able to goat him into using it on him on All In. And now we saw Will Ospreay use it on Kyle Fletcher and pick up the W tonight. And I think that Kyle Fletcher lost, right? But is it a bad loss when you had this great match against one of the best in-ring wrestlers today and you were able to hold your own and put on a match that was so great? Kyle Fletcher is somebody who AEW has high hopes in. He's somebody that AEW has invested a lot of TV time in. And I think that he has been hitting it out of the park with the stuff that he's been producing. I think that it was great. I thought that what they did was great tonight. And it's one of Will Ospreay's better matches of his career, which is saying a lot because the guy has put on so many different classics. But Will Ospreay won, and we're going to move on. Now, before I get into the main event, there was something that happened that was interesting. Now, if you've seen AEW TV the last several weeks, they've really been hyping up this Queen of the Ring movie. Toni Storm is involved in it. I believe that she's producing it as well. I could be wrong. But you had the director sitting in, the front row. There was actually a lot of celebrities that were on the show tonight. You had, Ken Jeong. You had Leslie, what's her name? Leslie Jones, who's from SNL and the female Ghostbuster movie. So you had shots of Will Sasso, and you had multiple different celebrities at the show. So they were interviewing the director of this Queen of the Ring movie, and he brought along 2 actresses that are also in the movie as well. And the director was hyping up the movie, because Toni Storm is involved in it. And then Renee went and asked questions to the 2 actresses that he brought. I forgot. I should have wrote their names down. That is on me. But she asked one of the actresses a question. And the actress said, "Did you guys know?" Basically, I'm paraphrasing. She was like, "What I've learned about wrestling is the wrestlers know who are going to win before the fans." Now, guys, I hope I'm not bursting anybody's bubble. We all know wrestling is scripted, predetermined, fake, whatever term you like to use or whatever term you feel comfortable with. But situational awareness, I feel like, is a very important thing. I don't like it when we're in the moment, and this is just me personally, when we're in the moment of watching something take place when it involves wrestling, and immediately after it happens, we have to break kayfabe or make it abundantly clear that, hey, what you just saw, it's a show. I know it's a show. You know it's a show. You don't have to tell me that it's a show. I am smart enough to know that it's a show. It's just a pet peeve of mine, and it was something that didn't need to be happen. And people like to bring up, The Rock does these press conferences, and he talks about basically, we mapped this out. Yeah, this was all a part of the plan. We've been planning this for so long. When I was walking to the ring, I told so-and-so this or that. Like, I don't like the fact that we saw some very impactful moment on screen. And less than 2 hours later or 30 minutes later, depending on when that segment took place, that, hey, we're being told that, yeah, this is a show. And we're going to treat it like a scene just happened. It just bugs me. Personally, it bugs me. It can be all right for you. That's you. But it just personally it bugs me. We're going to go to the comment section. Great section. Will has changed my mind as well. I thought Bryan Danielson was the best. The American Dragon is pretty freaking badass. And Will Ospreay is good as well. What an arrogant asshole that lady is. I personally did enjoy that. I know you didn't enjoy that. And I can't be the only individual who didn't. Guys, I'm going to repeat it again. Make sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't. It really helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. And it is free. Always remember that it is free. Next, we're going to get into the main event between Mox and Cope. I felt like this match was DOA. It was dead on arrival. After we had all these matches leading up to it, where you had all this fast-paced action and all this brutal, things that took place, that these 2 guys weren't going to be able to do anything that was going to be able to match what we saw earlier in the night. Now, this was a very slow and plodding match. As you guys know, Cope is a more seasoned gentleman, so you can't expect the guy to be doing what Will Ospreay or Kenny Omega was doing. But at the same time, it's like, man, it felt as if, I don't know. Imagine watching a movie and you're seeing this very intense action movie with all these crazy different scenes and all this crazy different CGI and special effects. And it just ended like extremely flat. It's kind of felt like what went down tonight. Now, I love Cope. You probably love Cope. I've stated in other stuff my feelings on the Death Rider storyline. I think that it really kills the momentum of the show. And this is coming from a guy who my personal favorite member of the Shield is the Mox. So it's not like I'm a Mox hater, but they are just really dug in on this storyline. And it feels like they need to find a way to get out because this shit ain't working, right? And think about this. Ever since AEW has moved over to Max, I'm not saying that it's millions of people or tens of thousands. I don't know the number. They don't release the numbers like that. But there's people who probably never watched a second of AEW, who now the fact that they are on Max has started watching AEW and have no idea what the world title looks like because it's in that briefcase. And Mox has been carrying it around for so long. Now, there was a lot of cheeky shenanigans that was going to go down. You know that anytime the Death Riders are involved, we are going to see a lot of cheeky shenanigans. And there was a point where the referee was down. We had Wheeler Yuta, they're hyping up and really talking about how he is a Stockholm Syndrome victim. He's under this mind control of Jon Moxley, kind of like Vegeta was by, Babbidi's mind control in Dragon Ball Z. And you see Wheeler lay out Cope. And you see Jay White come out trying to make the assist because Jay White is a guy who's been on Cope's side for the last several weeks. I thought as soon as we saw Jay White come out, before the match even started, I thought we were going to get Jay White turning on Cope. But he accidentally hits Cope in the head with the briefcase after it was brought in by Jon Moxley when the referee was down. I thought we were going to get, that was going to be the ending. Cope kicks out. We get Cope looking as if he is going to win the AEW championship, but he gets the referee pulled out of the ring, and it's by Hoodie Man, and is revealed to be none other than that dastardly, sick bastard Christian Cage. He signs the contract to make the match officially a triple threat. We had Christian spear Cope. I thought that was going to be the end of it. Then we have Jon Moxley come back into the ring. He puts this bulldog on Christian Cage. Christian Cage passes out. Mox retains the title. Bunch of bullshit, right? What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing with this? Now, they kind of made a save at the end where they had Swerve, perched up like Batman, on that ledge of where, the fans are. And you had that confrontation between Prince Nana and Mox where Nana was used as a decoy to distract Mox. But still, man, I ain't trying to see that shit no more. And I know I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one who's not feeling the Death Rider story. You see everybody on social media talking about it. Now, social media is different from real life. There may be people in real life who love it and want to see more of it, want 2 straight hours of Death Rider stuff. But me personally, I'm sick of it. I don't want to see it anymore. Fingers crossed, I pray to the wrestling gods that we have Swerve Strickland take the championship off of Jon Moxley and he is back to being the AEW champion. But for now, what the hell? And the fact that they had Christian have this contract since July of last year, and to have him pull a Baron Corbin or a Damian Sandow, where they cashed in their money in the banks in WWE and were unsuccessful. The fact that this was the first time AEW has done such a thing, and they had it be an unsuccessful cash-in, I thought it was a waste of time, and Christian Cage is a guy who's accomplished so much in his career, so this isn't going to, kill him, but damn, what the hell? But if I'm going to give this show on the Dave Meltzer star rating, I am going to give it a 4.5 because there was great matches that I thoroughly enjoyed, like the sequences between Toni Storm and Ryan May, Kenny Omega and Takeshita, Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. I like the opening match between MJF and Hangman Adam Page as well. And I don't want to sit there and say that the main event spoiled everything, but the way that it ended, man. You remember when you watch a movie or a TV show and you see a series finale, you always remember the ending. That's the first thing you always talk about. When you talk about The Sopranos, you don't talk about the great episodes that happened in like season 3 or season 2. You talk about the ending. When you talk about Game of Thrones, you don't talk about the Battle of the Bastards. You talk about how bad the last season was, right? So the lasting image of Mox retaining, it took half a star off for me. Before I get out of here, guys, I'm going to look at the comment section one more time. I was really hoping for a Captain Charisma win. Same. They didn't give the people what they wanted. I agree. Where are the rest of the patriarchy when he needed them? Who knows, right? Maybe they're in the back playing video games. And if that was happening, they should be very happy that The Undertaker wasn't around because he wouldn't have enjoyed that. Okay? Guys, before I get out of here, remember to like the video and subscribe if you aren't. Like I said before, it helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. And it's free. Always remember that it's free. But guys, I'm going to get out of here. I got a lot more shit that I got to record that is going to be dropping throughout the rest of the night and through tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that, guys. I appreciate you for tuning in, whether it was for the whole show, 5 seconds, or 10 seconds. It is much appreciated on my end. Guys, I am Kevin Zwicker. I'm out.